Story number 1. Echoes of Stanley. I never believed that hotels could hold secrets. Growing up, I always thought of them as mere buildings providing temporary shelter, a place to rest and rejuvenate before continuing our journeys. But that belief was shattered the night I took the late shift at the Stanley Hotel in Estes Park, Colorado, a place that would forever haunt my memories and alter my understanding of reality. The Stanley Hotel stood majestically against the backdrop of the Rocky Mountains, its grand architecture exuding an air of timeless elegance. Known for its stunning views and historic charm, it had long been a favorite destination for travelers seeking both comfort and inspiration. Little did I know, the Stanley harbored dark whispers from its past, echoes that would reach out to me on a stormy January night. I had recently been hired as a night clerk, eager to embrace the solitude and peace that came with the late hours. The job was perfect for someone like me, who preferred the quiet hum of the night over the bustling energy of the day. My first week had been uneventful, filled with routine tasks and polite interactions with a handful of night owls and weary travelers. But the nights always held an undercurrent of something more, a subtle tension that I couldn't quite place. It was January 15th, and the weather forecast had warned of an impending snowstorm. The sky was overcast, and the first flurries had already begun to fall, covering the landscape in a delicate blanket of white. As I settled into my desk in the front lobby, I couldn't shake the feeling that this night would be different from the rest. The clock struck midnight, and the storm outside intensified, the wind howling through the trees and the snow piling higher against the windows. The Stanley's grand halls were eerily quiet, the only sound being the occasional creak of the old building settling against the fury of the storm. I decided to make a quick round, checking the hallways and ensuring that all doors were securely locked, a standard procedure, but one that felt particularly important tonight. As I walked down the dimly lit corridor, my flashlight beam cutting through the darkness, I noticed a flickering light emanating from one of the rooms. It was room 217, a suite listed as unoccupied in the guest registry. Curiosity piqued, I approached the door, my heart beating a little faster. The lights inside were dim, casting long shadows that danced eerily along the walls. "Hello?" I called out, my voice echoing through the silent hallway. There was no response, just the steady hum of the storm outside. I reached for the door handle, hesitating for a moment before gently pushing it open. The room was cold, the temperature dropping noticeably as I stepped inside. A thick layer of dust covered the furniture, and the heavy curtains were drawn tightly shut against the storm. In the center of the room stood an antique dresser, its surface adorned with intricate carvings that hinted at a bygone era. As I moved closer, my flashlight revealed something chilling, a large, fog-covered mirror hanging above the dresser. I approached the mirror, the air growing colder with each step. My breath visible in the frigid air, I wiped away the condensation, revealing my reflection. But what I saw was not my own image staring back at me. Instead, the mirror displayed a different scene, a dimly lit room, eerily similar to the one I was in, but devoid of any furniture or life. As I stared, frozen in place, the words "Don't come back" appeared on the mirror's surface, written in a shaky hand that was unmistakably not mine. My blood ran cold as I realized the gravity of what I was witnessing. The mirror seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy, the words glowing faintly in the darkness. A shiver ran down my spine, and I took a step back, my mind racing to make sense of the inexplicable. "Who's there?" I called out again, my voice barely above a whisper. Silence was the only response, the storm outside now pounding against the windows with renewed ferocity. Determined to uncover the truth, I began to investigate the room more thoroughly. The furniture was old but well maintained, as if untouched by time. On the dresser, I found an old, leather-bound journal, its pages yellowed with age. Curiosity overcame my fear as I opened it, the brittle pages revealing handwritten entries in elegant script. The entries told the story of the Moreau family, who had once lived in the Stanley Hotel during the Prohibition era. They were a happy family, living in luxury, until a series of mysterious deaths began to plague them. The journal detailed their growing paranoia and fear, culminating in a final, desperate entry. "They are watching us. The shadows move with intent. We must perform the ritual to appease them, or they will take us all. Pray for us." A chill crept over me as I closed the journal, the weight of their desperation hanging heavy in the air. It became clear that something sinister had taken hold of this room, something that sought to claim more souls within the Stanley's walls. As I turned to leave, the temperature plummeted further, and the room seemed to darken, the shadows lengthening and twisting into grotesque shapes. The whispers returned, faint at first but growing louder, more insistent. They echoed through the room, a chorus of tormented souls pleading for release. I rushed out of the room, the door slamming shut behind me with a force that sent me stumbling into the hallway. The storm had escalated, the snow now a relentless barrage against the windows. I knew I had to get back to the lobby and call for backup, but the oppressive atmosphere of the hotel made every step feel like a struggle against an unseen force. As I made my way back, the lights in the corridors began to flicker erratically, casting disorienting patterns of light and shadow that seemed to move with a life of their own. The whispers followed me, a constant reminder of the room's dark history and the lingering presence of the Moreau family. Reaching the lobby, I found it deserted, the only sound the pounding of the storm outside. My phone rang, jolting me from my thoughts. It was the station dispatcher, her voice tight with urgency. "Callahan, we need you to check on a call from an abandoned house in the suburbs. Strange noises reported. Please respond immediately." I glanced at my watch, just past 1 a.m. Another call, another mystery to unravel. But as I prepared to leave, the flickering lights and the oppressive silence in the lobby became overwhelming. I felt a pull, a magnetic force drawing me back to the front desk, the journal still clutched in my hand. Suddenly, the door to the lobby burst open, the wind from the storm rushing in and extinguishing the remaining candles. The room plunged into darkness, the only light coming from the flickering flashlight in my hand. The whispers returned, louder and more chaotic, surrounding me on all sides. The words "don't come back" echoed through the darkness, a chilling reminder of the warning I had seen in the mirror. Panic surged through me as I realized that the spirits of the Moreau family were not just confined to room 217, they were everywhere within the Stanley, their presence suffocating and malevolent. Desperate to escape, I turned to leave, but the front door was locked tight, the storm outside now a raging tempest that made any attempt to force it open futile. The whispers grew into a cacophony of voices, their pleas for help intertwining with threats of retribution. I knew I had to find a way to appease the spirits, to break the curse that held them captive within these walls. Returning to room 217, I felt an invisible force pushing me forward, urging me to complete the ritual outlined in the journal. The room awaited, the mirror now clear and showing nothing but my own reflection. Taking a deep breath, I opened the journal once more, the final entry serving as a guide to performing the ritual that could free the spirits of the Moreau family and end their torment. The instructions were precise, requiring specific items scattered throughout the room and a precise incantation to be spoken at midnight. I gathered the necessary items, candles, salt, and a small vial of water, and began to follow the instructions meticulously. As I arranged the objects on the altar, the temperature in the room dropped further, the shadows growing more aggressive and the whispers turning into screams of anguish and despair. Reciting the incantation, I felt a surge of energy coursing through me, the power of the ritual binding my will to the ancient words. The candles flickered violently, the flames dancing in a chaotic frenzy as the symbols on the altar began to glow with a dark, pulsating light. The spirits of the Moreau family materialized around me, their forms wavering and distorted, eyes hollow with eternal sorrow. "Why do you try to free us?" one of them cried, her voice filled with both hope and bitterness. "Do you not understand the darkness that binds us?" I met her gaze, my own fear giving way to determination. "I want to help you. Please, let us end this together." The room trembled as the ritual reached its climax, the oppressive presence of the spirits battling against the light of the candles. The symbols on the walls began to burn away, their dark energy dissipating as the ritual took hold. The whispers turned into harmonious chants, the spirits finally finding the peace they had long been denied. With a final, blinding flash of light, the curse was broken. The room fell silent, the shadows receding as the spirits of the Moreau family were freed from their eternal torment. I slumped to the ground, exhausted but victorious, the oppressive darkness lifted from the Stanley Hotel. As dawn broke over Estes Park, the storm had passed, leaving behind a serene stillness that belied the horrors of the previous night. The Stanley Hotel, once a place of beauty and history, now stood as a monument to the resilience of the human spirit and the enduring power of compassion and courage. But the memory of that night lingered, a haunting reminder that some places hold onto their secrets tightly, and that the echoes of the past can reach out to those who dare to listen. The Stanley Hotel remains a place of allure and mystery, its halls forever echoing with the silent whispers of those who found peace within its walls. And so, as I sit by my fireplace on quiet evenings, the snow gently falling outside, I can't help but feel a connection to the spirits of the Morrow family, their stories now intertwined with my own. The Stanley had taught me that even in the face of unimaginable darkness, hope and determination can illuminate the path to redemption, ensuring that the whispers of the past are never forgotten. Story number 2. The Ghost Storm on Lake Eerie. I never thought that a simple fishing trip could turn into a nightmare that would haunt me for the rest of my days. My name is Jack Turner, and what was supposed to be a routine inspection of our fishing nets beneath the icy surface of Lake Eerie became an encounter with the supernatural that defied all logic and reason. It was mid-January, and Lake Eerie was a frozen expanse of white, the surface shimmering under the pale winter sun. Our small fishing crew, Mike, Sarah, Emily, and I, had braved the biting cold and treacherous ice to ensure our nets were in good condition for the upcoming season. We were seasoned fishermen, accustomed to the harsh conditions of the Great Lakes, but nothing could have prepared us for what was about to unfold. The day had started like any other, with the sun barely cresting the horizon and the sky a dull gray. We loaded our equipment onto the icebound boat, the sound of our movements muffled by the thick layer of snow that covered everything. Mike, the oldest among us, took the helm, his experienced hands guiding us through the familiar path to our designated fishing spot. As we approached the center of the lake, a sudden gust of wind whipped across the water, sending a flurry of snowflakes into our faces. The temperature dropped sharply, our breaths visible in the frigid air. Sarah wrapped her scarf tighter around her neck, her eyes scanning the horizon for any signs of danger. Emily, our youngest, clung to her fishing rod, her nerves frayed by the relentless cold. "Keep an eye out, everyone," Mike called over the roar of the wind. "We don't want to get caught off guard by any unexpected storms." I nodded, setting up the nets with practiced precision. The rhythmic thud of the equipment against the ice provided a steady backdrop to the howling wind. The lake was eerily quiet, the usual sounds of water lapping against the shore and the distant calls of gulls absent in the oppressive silence. About halfway through our inspection, we heard it, a faint, melodic sound that seemed out of place in the desolate winter landscape. It was the unmistakable ringing of ship bells, echoing across the ice-covered lake. We exchanged puzzled glances, the sound growing louder and more distinct, yet no ship was in sight. "Did you guys hear that?" Emily asked, her voice tinged with unease. Mike nodded, his expression serious. "Yeah, sounds like ship bells. Strange for this time of year." We followed the sound, our footsteps crunching in the snow as we made our way toward the source. The bells grew louder, their haunting melody cutting through the wind like a knife. As we reached the edge of the frozen lake, the air grew colder, the snow swirling around us in a frenzied dance. And then, through the thick mist, we saw it, a ghostly apparition of a ship, its sails tattered and torn, drifting aimlessly across the lake. The vessel was shrouded in a faint, ethereal glow, the outlines of ghostly figures standing motionless on deck. The sight sent a chill down my spine, a primal fear that I couldn't shake. "That's impossible," Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible over the sound of the bells. "There are no ships out here." But the apparition remained, the ghost ship sailing slowly through the mist, the figures on deck staring blankly into the distance. The wind picked up again, the snow now falling in heavy sheets as the temperature continued to plummet. We stood frozen, unable to tear our eyes away from the spectral vessel. Suddenly, the bells ceased, the silence that followed more oppressive than the howling wind. The ghost ship began to fade, its form dissolving into the mist until it was nothing more than a memory lingering on the frozen surface of Lake Eerie. The snowstorm intensified, the wind howling like a banshee, as if angry at us for witnessing the apparition. "Let's get back to the boat," Mike said urgently, breaking the spell. "We need to get out of here before this storm gets worse." We hurried back to our boat, the storm now raging with renewed fury. The wind whipped against the hull, and the snow blinded us, making it difficult to navigate. As we reached the center of the lake, a massive gust of wind tore through the boat, capsizing us in an instant. The freezing water engulfed me, the shock of the cold making it hard to breathe. I struggled to stay afloat, the icy grip of Lake Erie pulling me under. In those terrifying moments, I thought of Mike, Sarah, and Emily, their faces etched with fear as the storm raged around us. Desperation fueled my every move, and somehow, against all odds, I managed to keep my head above water. The howling wind and the relentless snowstorm blurred my vision, but the haunting melody of the ship bells echoed in my ears, a reminder of the ghostly vessel we had encountered. When I finally pulled myself onto the ice, shivering uncontrollably, the storm began to abate. The snow slowed to a gentle fall, and the wind's fury subsided into a whisper. Exhausted and numb, I looked around, realizing that I was alone on the frozen lake. My friends were nowhere to be seen, their absence sending a sinking feeling into my gut. Mike? Sarah? Emily? I called out, my voice cracking with desperation. The only response was the eerie stillness of the deserted lake, broken only by the occasional creak of ice shifting under my weight. Panic set in as I realized the gravity of our situation. The storm had not only thrown us into the frozen expanse, but also erased any traces of our presence, leaving us isolated in the middle of a ghostly landscape. The memories of the ghost ship haunted me, the spectral figures staring into the distance as if waiting for something or someone. Days passed in a haze of desperation and fear, the frozen landscape offering little solace or hope. I rationed whatever food and water I had, my mind consumed by the mystery of the ghost ship and the fate of my friends. The nights were the worst, the darkness bringing back the haunting melodies of the ship bells and the eerie presence of the spectral vessel. One particularly cold night, as I huddled in the makeshift shelter I had fashioned from the remnants of our boat, I heard it, the faint sound of ship bells once more, echoing across the frozen lake. My heart raced as I listened, the sound growing louder and more insistent, pulling me towards the center of the lake. Against my better judgment, I ventured out into the night, the snow falling in thick, heavy flakes that obscured my vision. The sound of the bells guided me through the desolate expanse, leading me to the very spot where the ghost ship had appeared. There, amidst the swirling snow, stood the spectral vessel once more, its ghostly form shimmering in the pale light. This time, however, there was no mist to shroud its presence. The ship stood clear and unmistakable, its sails billowing in an unseen wind, the ghostly figures on deck staring straight at me. A deep sense of sorrow filled the air, the spectral crew seemingly aware of my presence. "Please," I whispered, my voice trembling. "Help us." The figures on deck remained motionless, their hollow eyes reflecting an eternal sadness. The ship began to fade once more, the spectral light dimming until it was nothing more than a memory on the ice. The snowstorm returned with a vengeance, the wind howling like a wounded beast, forcing me to retreat back to my shelter. In that moment, I understood the truth. The ghost ship was not just a figment of our imagination or a relic of the past. It was a vessel of lost souls, trapped in an eternal cycle of torment and despair, doomed to relive their tragic fates on the frozen expanse of Lake Erie. Determined to break the curse and save my friends, I delved into the history of Lake Erie, uncovering tales of shipwrecks and unexplained disappearances that had plagued the area for centuries. The stories spoke of a curse cast by vengeful spirits, condemning those who dared to venture too far into the frozen waters. Armed with this knowledge, I knew what I had to do. I began performing the rituals outlined in the ancient texts, hoping to appease the restless spirits and free my friends from their spectral prison. Each night, under the pale light of the moon, I conducted the ceremonies, the air thick with anticipation and fear. Finally, after days of relentless effort, the snowstorm began to wane, the howling winds giving way to a serene calm. The ghost ship appeared one last time, its spectral form shimmering in the fading light. As I completed the final rites, the ship began to glow with a radiant light, the ghostly figures on deck finally finding peace as the curse was lifted. With a blinding flash, the ghost ship dissolved into the night, the oppressive darkness lifted from the frozen lake. The snow ceased to fall, and the wind's fury subsided, leaving behind a tranquil stillness that felt almost sacred. Exhausted but victorious, I called out once more, hoping to hear my friends' voices in the newfound peace. "Mike! Sarah! Emily!" Their voices answered me from the darkness, their relief palpable as they emerged from the shadows, their eyes reflecting the gratitude and freedom they had longed for. The nightmare was over, the ghost ship now a fading memory on the ice. As we made our way back to civilization, the first rays of dawn breaking through the clouds, I felt a profound sense of accomplishment and peace. The haunted storm on Lake Erie had tested us in ways we could never have imagined, but our resilience and determination had triumphed over the darkness. Years have passed since that harrowing January night, but the memory of the ghost storm remains vivid in my mind. Story number 3. Rebirth Night at Amityville. I never believed in curses or haunted houses. Growing up in the heart of New York City, surrounded by the relentless pace and bright lights, I always thought stories of ghosts and malevolent spirits were nothing more than exaggerated tales to scare children. But that all changed the night Emma and I decided to rent the infamous Amityville house on Long Island, seeking a fresh start away from the chaos of our lives. Emma and I had been married for 3 years, our relationship strained by the pressures of demanding jobs and the constant hustle of city living. We longed for tranquility, a place where we could reconnect and build our future without the incessant noise and stress. When we stumbled upon the listing for the Amityville house, a secluded property with a rich history and a hefty price tag, we hesitated. The stories of the 1974 massacre and the subsequent hauntings were well known, but we convinced ourselves that the house had changed, that it was just a beautiful old property in need of renovation. The house stood majestically against the backdrop of the dense woods, its Victorian architecture both elegant and imposing. The windows were large, allowing ample natural light to flood the interiors, and the expansive grounds promised privacy and serenity. As we approached the property, the first snowflakes of January began to fall, adding a touch of magic to the already picturesque scene. "Can you believe we're really doing this?" Emma asked, her eyes wide with a mix of excitement and apprehension. "I think it's exactly what we need," I replied, taking her hand as we walked up the stone pathway to the front door. The warmth emanating from inside was inviting, a stark contrast to the biting cold outside. The realtor had assured us that the house had been thoroughly cleaned and renovated, with all previous tenants having left without incident. Skeptical but hopeful, we stepped inside, greeted by the cozy ambience of a well-maintained home. The living room was spacious, with a grand fireplace as its centerpiece, and the air was filled with the faint scent of pine from the newly installed wood paneling. We spent the day unpacking and settling into our new home, the snowstorm outside intensifying as evening approached. The storm added a layer of isolation, cutting us off from the outside world and heightening our senses. As midnight approached, we decided to settle down with a warm cup of cocoa, enjoying the peacefulness that had eluded us for so long. But peace was a fleeting illusion. At exactly 12 o'clock, a loud bang reverberated through the house, startling us both. It sounded like a gunshot, sharp and sudden, echoing from the upstairs hallway. Our hearts raced as we exchanged nervous glances. "Did you hear that?" Emma whispered, her voice trembling. "Yeah," I replied, trying to steady my breathing. "I'll check it out." I grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen drawer and cautiously made my way up the grand staircase. The house was silent, the storm outside masking any other sounds. Reaching the top, I saw the hallway illuminated by the weak glow of the moonlight streaming through the windows. The source of the noise was unclear, but I could feel an unsettling presence in the air. As I moved down the hallway, the flashlight flickered, casting eerie shadows on the walls adorned with antique paintings and ornate moldings. The further I walked, the more the atmosphere thickened with an inexplicable tension. Suddenly, the beam of light caught something, a fleeting movement out of the corner of my eye. I turned sharply, but there was nothing there, just the swirling snow outside and the oppressive silence within the house. "Emma," I called out softly, unsure if she was in the same part of the house. "I didn't see anything, but something felt off up here." She emerged from the living room, her expression a mix of fear and concern. "Maybe it's just the wind," she suggested, though her voice lacked conviction. We decided to return downstairs, but as we descended the staircase, the temperature seemed to drop drastically. Our breaths became visible, and an icy chill settled over us, making our skin prickle with unease. Reaching the bottom of the stairs, we noticed something strange. The shadows in the hallway were deeper, more defined, almost as if they had a life of their own. Before we could react, the lights flickered violently and went out, plunging us into complete darkness. Panic surged through me as I fumbled for my phone to use as a flashlight, but it was dead. The only source of light now was the faint glow of the storm outside, casting ghostly patterns through the windows. "We need to get out of here," Emma whispered, her voice barely audible over the howling wind. As we moved towards the front door, a series of soft thuds echoed from upstairs, rhythmic and deliberate. Our hearts pounded in our chests as we exchanged terrified glances. Something was up there, something that didn't belong. Maybe it's just a branch hitting the roof, I suggested, trying to rationalize the noise. But Emma shook her head, fear etched in her eyes. I don't think so. It sounded too deliberate. We reached the door, fumbling with the lock, but it wouldn't budge. The wind howled louder, and the sounds from upstairs grew more intense, now accompanied by faint whispers that seemed to emanate from the very walls of the house. Suddenly, the door swung open with a force that knocked us off our feet. Before us stood a shadowy figure, its form barely discernible, eyes glowing with an unnatural light. Time seemed to stand still as we stared into the abyss of its empty gaze, the malevolent energy surrounding it palpable. Don't go back, it hissed, the voice echoing in our minds rather than through the air. Without thinking, we turned and ran, the house seeming to come alive with every step we took. The hallway stretched endlessly, the shadows twisting and contorting, blocking our path. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, filling our minds with fear and confusion. We stumbled back down the staircase, the front door now ajar, revealing the full fury of the storm outside. Bursting through, we sprinted into the blinding snow, the house behind us a silhouette against the raging tempest. The screams and whispers faded as we put distance between us and the cursed property, but the fear lingered, etched into our very souls. The days that followed were a blur of sleepless nights and haunting dreams. Emma and I couldn't shake the images of the shadowy figure, its empty eyes following us wherever we went. The words "don't go back" echoed in our minds, a constant reminder of the terror we had escaped. Determined to understand what had happened, I delved into the history of the Stanley Hotel, uncovering stories of previous occupants who had experienced similar phenomena. It seemed that the house fed off the fear and despair of its inhabitants, trapping them in a cycle of torment until they either succumbed or found a way to break the curse. Emma and I knew we couldn't stay in New York any longer. The shadows of Amityville had left an indelible mark on us, a reminder that some places are better left alone. We decided to leave, seeking refuge far from the haunted halls of the Stanley. But even as we drove away, the nightmares persisted. Each night, we were haunted by visions of the shadowy figure, the whispers of the cursed house, and the feeling of being watched. The trauma of that night had seeped into our lives, a lingering presence that refused to let us forget. One evening, as we sat by the fireplace in our new home, Emma turned to me, her eyes hollow with exhaustion. I can't sleep anymore. Every night, it's like the house is still here, watching us. I took her hand, pulling her close. We'll get through this together. We'll find a way to heal. But the scars ran deep. Weeks turned into months, and the horrors of Amityville continued to follow us, the shadows and whispers a constant reminder of our ordeal. We sought help, visiting therapists and joining support groups, but nothing seemed to ease the fears that clung to us like a second skin. One night, driven by a desperate need for closure, I decided to confront the shadows once more. Emma begged me not to, but I couldn't shake the feeling that facing our fears was the only way to truly move on. I returned to the Stanley, the snow now a gentle blanket covering the house in peaceful silence. The front door was unlocked, as if inviting me back into its dark embrace. Taking a deep breath, I stepped inside, the familiar chill welcoming me like an old friend. The house was quiet, the storm a distant memory. I made my way to the room where the figure had appeared, the shadows now more defined, stretching across the walls like tendrils of darkness. As I approached the mirror, the same eerie sight greeted me, a message etched in frost, "Don't go back." But this time, something was different. Instead of fear, I felt a sense of understanding, a connection to the souls trapped within the house. I placed a hand on the mirror, feeling the coldness seep into my skin, and began to speak the words I had learned from the journal, a chant meant to appease the restless spirits. As I recited the incantation, the air grew warmer, the oppressive presence lifting as the shadows began to dissolve. The house seemed to breathe a sigh of relief, the whispers turning into gentle whispers of gratitude. Suddenly, the mirror shimmered, and the shadowy figure reappeared, its eyes no longer empty but filled with a sense of peace. "Thank you," it whispered, the voice now soft and free of malice. "You have freed us." With those final words, the figure faded, the mirror returning to its normal reflection. The house, once a place of terror, now stood silent and serene, the curse lifted and the spirits finally at rest. I left Amityville that night with a sense of closure and hope, the shadows behind me and the whispers fading into memory. Emma and I returned home, the nightmares no longer haunting our dreams, replaced by a newfound peace and the strength to rebuild our lives. But the lessons learned in the haunted halls of the Stanley Hotel remained with us, a reminder that some places hold onto their secrets tightly, and that courage and understanding can break even the darkest of curses. Amityville had tested us in ways we could never have imagined, but it had also taught us the true meaning of resilience and the enduring power of love and hope. As I sit by the fireplace now, the snow gently falling outside, I reflect on that fateful night and the journey that followed. The Stanley Hotel stands as a testament to the thin line between reality and the supernatural, a place where shadows once held sway but were ultimately overcome by the light of understanding and compassion. And so, the story of our rebirth at Amityville lives on, a chilling yet inspiring tale of survival, courage, and the relentless pursuit of peace in the face of unimaginable horror. Story number 4. Frostbound Curse of Salem. I never believed in curses or haunted houses. Growing up in the bustling heart of Boston, my life was a whirlwind of deadlines, traffic jams, and the relentless hum of city living. The idea that a house could possess malevolent intent was something I dismissed as superstition, until my wife, Laura, and I decided to leave it all behind and start anew in Salem, Massachusetts. Salem had always intrigued me with its rich history and dark legends, the infamous witch trials of the 17th century being the most talked about. When we found the quaint Victorian-style home nestled among snow-covered pine trees, it seemed perfect. The realtor assured us it was a fresh start, free from the shadows of its past. Our first winter in Salem was picturesque. The White Mountains loomed in the distance, their peaks dusted with snow, and the town was adorned with festive lights that twinkled against the backdrop of long winter nights. Laura and I reveled in the peacefulness, our daughter, Emily, thriving in her new school, and our lives slowly falling into a comfortable rhythm. The house, though older, was well maintained, with modern amenities seamlessly integrated into its classic architecture. We spent our weekends exploring the town, enjoying the crisp winter air, and making new friends. One chilly January evening, as snowflakes danced outside our windows, Laura decided to clear the backyard. The ground was covered in a thick blanket of snow, but beneath it, the earth had softened from the recent rains. As she shoveled, her shovel hit something solid buried beneath the surface. Curiosity piqued, she unearthed a small, old wooden box, its surface weathered and adorned with intricate carvings that hinted at a bygone era. "Look what I found," Laura called out, holding the box up for me to see. I approached, my interest mirrored in her eyes. "What do you think it is?" She shrugged, brushing off the excess snow. "Not sure. It looks ancient. Maybe some kind of keepsake?" We decided to open it together, the lid creaking as we lifted it. Inside lay a peculiar doll, its porcelain face cracked and eyes hollow, staring blankly into nothingness. Accompanying it was a yellowed piece of paper with the words scrawled in faded ink, "Con thin no se den." Translated, it meant rage will come. "That's creepy," I remarked, feeling an uneasy chill despite the warmth of the fireplace that crackled merrily in the living room. Laura smiled, trying to lighten the mood. "Probably just a forgotten trinket. We'll find a place for it." But that night, as the clock struck midnight, the temperature inside the house plummeted. I noticed it first, my breath visible in the air, despite the fireplace still burning brightly. Laura and Emily were already in bed, snug under their blankets, but the drop in temperature was undeniable. I decided to check on them, making my way to the master bedroom. As I entered the living room, I felt an oppressive coldness settle over me, the shadows lengthening unnaturally across the room. The fireplace's warmth seemed insufficient to combat the sudden chill, and my breath quickened involuntarily. "Laura, are you awake?" I called softly. She sat up, rubbing her eyes. "Yeah, what's wrong?" I felt a sudden drop in temperature. "It's freezing in here." She glanced around, noticing the unnaturally cold air. "Maybe it's just a draft. I'll check the windows." As Laura inspected the windows, I turned to look at Emily's room. That's when I heard it, a faint, eerie giggle emanating from the direction of the staircase. My heart raced as I approached the hallway, the shadows in the living room seeming to move with a life of their own. "Emily?" I called, my voice wavering. "Are you up?" No response. The giggling had stopped, replaced by an unsettling silence. I walked towards her room, each step feeling heavier than the last. Pushing open the door, I found Emily sitting on her bed, clutching her stuffed bear, her eyes wide with fear. "Sweetie, what's wrong?" I asked, kneeling beside her. She looked up, her eyes darting nervously. "I heard the doll laugh, Daddy." It wasn't supposed to laugh. My blood ran cold. "The doll? Laura, did you move the doll upstairs?" She nodded, her small hands pointing towards the corner where the doll had been placed on a shelf. I glanced over, and sure enough, the doll was still there, its cracked face staring ominously at us. "Let's put it back downstairs," I suggested, trying to mask the fear creeping up my spine. As we walked back to the living room, the air grew colder, the shadows deepening around us. When we reached the living room, we found the wooden box still on the shelf, the doll now sitting prominently in the center, as if claiming its domain. "Something's not right," Laura whispered, her voice barely audible over the creaking of the old house. We decided to leave the doll alone for the night, hoping that the morning would bring clarity. But sleep was elusive, the oppressive cold and the unsettling presence of the doll keeping us awake until dawn. The following days saw a series of inexplicable events. Objects moved on their own, lights flickered without reason, and the temperature continued to drop sporadically. Emily's behavior changed. She became withdrawn, often staring blankly at the doll as if entranced. Determined to get to the bottom of the mystery, I began researching the history of our home. The Stanley House, as it was officially known, had been built in the early 1800s and had changed hands numerous times. But the most troubling part was a local legend about a family tragedy that had occurred in the house decades ago. According to the tale, a young girl had been found dead in the attic, her body contorted in a grotesque manner, and her spirit had never been at rest. Some believed her to be the vengeful ghost, while others thought the house itself was cursed, absorbing the pain and anger of its inhabitants. One evening, as I sifted through old newspaper archives, I stumbled upon an article that sent chills down my spine. It detailed the tragic death of a young girl named Clara Stanley, who had been the sole survivor of a house fire. The investigation had been inconclusive, with no clear cause of death, leaving many to speculate about supernatural involvement. Armed with this knowledge, I confronted Laura. "I think the doll is connected to Clara Stanley. Maybe it's her spirit trying to communicate." She nodded, her eyes reflecting a mixture of fear and determination. "What can we do to help her?" Before I could respond, the temperature in the house plummeted once more, and the shadows in the living room began to shift and move erratically. The air was thick with an unspoken rage, and I felt an invisible force pressing down on us. "We need to set things right," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "If Clara is trying to communicate, we need to listen." Determined to help the restless spirit, I delved deeper into the house's history, seeking any clues that could explain the curse that seemed to bind us. I found references to old rituals performed by the Stanley family, intended to protect the house from malevolent forces. But something had gone terribly wrong, trapping Clara's spirit within the confines of the house. One night, as the house groaned under the weight of another snowstorm, I discovered a hidden compartment in the attic. Inside, I found a collection of old journals belonging to Clara's mother, Margaret Stanley. The entries detailed her descent into madness after the tragic death of her daughter, her desperation to keep Clara's spirit at peace leading her to perform dark and forbidden rituals. The final entry was a frantic plea: "The curse will claim us all. We must break the cycle before it consumes our souls." Realizing that the only way to free Clara was to reverse the ritual, I began preparing the necessary items: candles, salt, and a mirror, each symbolically significant in the protective rites Margaret had documented. "Emma, do you have the salt and the candles?" I asked, knowing that every second counted. She nodded, fetching the items from the kitchen. Together, we made our way to the living room, the doll still sitting ominously in the center. I placed the candles around the room, their flames flickering softly, and sprinkled salt in a protective circle around us. Taking a deep breath, I began to recite the incantation from the journals, my voice steady despite the fear gnawing at me. The mirror glowed with an ethereal light, reflecting not just our images but also the haunting presence of Clara's spirit, her eyes filled with sorrow and longing. As I continued to chant, the room grew colder, the shadows responding to our actions. The doll began to shake violently, its porcelain face cracking further as if absorbing the rage of the house. Emily watched in awe, her fear slowly replaced by a sense of purpose. "We can do this," I whispered to Laura, the words giving me the strength to persevere. "We have to help her find peace." The incantation reached its climax, the candles burning brighter as the energy in the room intensified. Clara's spirit materialized before us, her form more defined but still ethereal, her eyes pleading for release. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice like the gentle rustling of leaves in the wind. "You have freed us." With those final words, the mirror shattered, the shards of glass scattering across the floor, and the oppressive presence that had plagued the house dissipated into thin air. The temperature began to rise, the shadows retreating as peace settled over the Stanley house. We stood in stunned silence, the weight of what we had accomplished sinking in. The doll lay broken on the floor, its curse lifted, and Clara's spirit finally at rest. The days that followed were marked by a newfound serenity in our home. The inexplicable events ceased, and Emily's demeanor improved, her eyes no longer haunted by fear. Salem's cold January days began to thaw, the snow melting into puddles that reflected the brightening skies. But the memory of that night lingered, a constant reminder of the darkness we had faced and the resilience it took to overcome it. The Stanley house, once a place of fear and sorrow, now stood as a testament to the power of love and determination in the face of malevolent forces. One evening, as we sat by the fireplace, enjoying the warmth that had long been absent, Emily approached me with a small, wrapped package. Unwrapping it, I found a delicate porcelain doll, its features mirroring the one we had found in the box, except this one was whole, pristine, and serene. "A gift for us," she said softly, her eyes shining with gratitude. I smiled, a sense of closure washing over me. "Thank you, Emily. It looks beautiful." As we placed the new doll on the shelf, the room felt lighter, the shadows no longer moving with a life of their own. The curse of the Stanley house had been broken, and we had played a part in freeing a tormented soul from her eternal anguish. Months turned into years, and the Stanley house became a cherished home rather than a haunted relic. We filled it with memories of laughter, love, and the warmth of family, the shadows of the past now nothing more than faint echoes in the halls. Yet, every January 15th, the anniversary of Clara Stanley's tragic death, we remembered the night the curse was lifted. It was a reminder of the darkness that once enveloped our lives and the strength it took to overcome it. We made a tradition of lighting candles and sharing stories, honoring Clara's memory and the peace she had finally found. One winter evening, as snow gently fell outside, Laura and I sat with Emily by the fireplace, the new doll watching over us with its serene smile. The room was filled with warmth and the comforting sounds of crackling flames, a stark contrast to the haunted silence that once dominated our home. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if we hadn't found that box?" I asked, breaking the comfortable silence. Laura reached out, taking my hand in hers. "Sometimes. But I'm grateful we did. It brought us closer and gave us a story that shows how strong we are together." Emily nodded, her eyes reflecting a maturity beyond her years. "And we helped Clara find peace. That's something to be proud of." As I looked around the room, I felt a profound sense of gratitude for the family we had and the home we had built together. The Stanley house was more than just a structure, it was a symbol of resilience, love, and the unwavering belief that even in the darkest of times, hope could prevail. But every now and then, late at night when the wind howls through the trees and the snow swirls outside, I couldn't help but wonder if Clara's spirit truly found peace or if some remnants of the curse still lingered, waiting for another unsuspecting soul to uncover its secrets. The memory of that frozen January night remained a haunting reminder of the thin line between reality and the supernatural, and the enduring power of the human spirit to confront and overcome the unknown. Years have passed since that harrowing night, but the legacy of our experience endures. The Stanley house continues to attract those seeking solace and a fresh start, unaware of the dark history that once threatened to consume us. Our story, once a tale of horror, has become part of the town's rich tapestry, shared among friends and family as a testament to the power of courage and the strength of unity in the face of malevolent forces. As I reflect on our journey, I realize that the true curse was not in the haunted doll or the malevolent spirits, but in the fear that could consume us if we allowed it. By facing the darkness together, we not only freed Clara's spirit but also ourselves, emerging stronger and more connected than ever before. And so, the Frostbound Curse of Salem stands as a chilling yet inspiring story, a reminder that even in the coldest, darkest nights, the warmth of love and determination can light the way to redemption and peace. Story number 5. Snowbound Shadows. I never considered myself a believer in the supernatural. Growing up in the heart of Boston, surrounded by the relentless pace and bright lights, I was always grounded in reality, dismissing ghost stories and legends as mere fabrications to entertain or scare. But that all changed the January night I spent in the White Mountains of New Hampshire, a night that blurred the line between reality and nightmare, leaving me questioning everything I thought I knew. It was the beginning of January, and the White Mountains were cloaked in a pristine blanket of snow. The forecast had been clear, a severe winter storm was brewing, but my friends and I were determined to embark on our annual winter ascent. Jake, Sarah, Emily, and I had been hiking companions for years, sharing countless trails and summits. This time, however, we felt an unspoken challenge in the air, a need to push our limits despite the ominous weather warnings. "Come on, Ethan," Jake urged as we gathered our gear in my cramped apartment. "It's January. It'll be the ultimate test of our skills." I hesitated, glancing around at their eager faces. Sarah, ever the pragmatic one, nodded in agreement. Emily, our youngest and most enthusiastic, bounced on her heels, her eyes sparkling with excitement. Despite the warnings from local guides about the unpredictability of winter climbs and the dangers of the White Mountains, we were united by our shared passion and the thrill of the unknown. "All right," I conceded, pulling on my thermal jacket. "But we need to be extra cautious. This isn't like our usual summer hikes." The drive to the trailhead was tense, the road slick with ice and snow, the windshield wipers struggling against the heavy snowfall. As we approached the base of the mountain, the landscape transformed into a winter wonderland, the trees heavy with snow and the air crisp with the scent of pine. The first steps of our ascent were exhilarating, the fresh powder crunching under our boots, the vast expanse of white stretching endlessly before us. Hours passed as we climbed higher, the weather worsening with each step. The wind picked up, howling through the pines, and the temperature plummeted, our breaths visible in the frigid air. By late afternoon, we reached a plateau near the summit, a vantage point that offered a breathtaking view of the surrounding wilderness. It was there that we noticed the footprints, large, elongated impressions in the fresh snow, leading toward a secluded cave nestled among the rocky outcrops. "Look at these," Sarah pointed out, crouching to examine the marks. "They're enormous, definitely not human." Jake squinted into the distance. "What kind of animal leaves tracks that big?" Before anyone could respond, a sudden gust of wind swept across the plateau, stirring the snow into a frenzied dance. The sky darkened, the sun obscured by heavy clouds, and the howling wind seemed to carry an unearthly presence. We exchanged uneasy glances, the eerie atmosphere intensifying our sense of foreboding. "We should set up camp here," I suggested, pointing to a flat area near the cave. "It's safer than continuing into the storm." Reluctantly, we agreed, unpacking our tents and securing our gear as the temperature continued to drop. The storm unleashed its fury as night fell, the howling winds and pelting snow making it impossible to continue our climb. We huddled together inside our tents, the cold seeping through our layers despite our best efforts to stay warm. Around midnight, the stillness was shattered by a loud, echoing howl that seemed to emanate from deep within the mountains. We froze, hearts pounding, as the sound reverberated through the valley. Moments later, another howl followed, closer this time, sending shivers down our spines. "Did you hear that?" Emily whispered, clutching her sleeping bag tightly. "Yeah," Jake replied, his voice tinged with fear. "It sounded like a wolf, but it was different." We listened in tense silence, the howling continuing intermittently, each cry more haunting than the last. The footprints leading to the cave now seemed all the more ominous, the possibility of encountering something unknown hanging heavy in the air. As the night wore on, the howling grew louder and more intense, blending with the relentless storm outside. Suddenly, a series of loud thuds echoed from the direction of the cave, followed by the unmistakable sound of crunching snow. My heart raced as I considered the possibilities, an animal or something far more sinister. "We need to check it out," Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Something's out there." Jake and Emily exchanged nervous glances, but the sense of camaraderie that had always bonded us pushed us forward. Grabbing our flashlights and bundling up in our cold weather gear, we cautiously made our way toward the cave entrance, the howling wind making it difficult to hear our own footsteps. As we approached the cave, the footprints became larger, more distorted, leading us into the darkness of the entrance. The air grew colder, the temperature dropping even further as we stepped inside, the beam of our flashlights piercing the inky blackness. The cave was narrow and winding, the walls slick with ice and the floor treacherously uneven. Suddenly, a shadow darted across the far end of the cave, disappearing as quickly as it had appeared. "Did you see that?" Emily asked, her voice trembling. "Probably just a fox or something," Jake replied, though his uncertainty was evident. We pressed on, deeper into the cave, the footprints leading us onward until we reached a spacious chamber illuminated by a faint, unnatural glow. In the center stood a towering snowman, its form grotesquely oversized, the eyes hollow pits that seemed to stare into our souls. The snowman's mouth was twisted into a malicious grin, and its arms were unnaturally long, ending in clawed hands that reached out toward us. "Guys, we need to go," Sarah urged, backing away slowly. But before we could turn, the snowman's head began to rotate, its cracked porcelain face contorting into an expression of pure rage. A deep, resonant growl emanated from its core, shaking the very foundations of the cave. "We need to run," I shouted, pulling Laura and Emily toward the exit. But as we turned, the cave seemed to shift, the walls closing in, making our escape impossible. The snowstorm outside intensified, the howling wind now accompanied by the sound of clattering snow and the relentless pounding of our hearts. The snowman advanced, its movements jerky and unnatural, the room growing darker as the storm's fury seeped into the cave. In a desperate bid for survival, we sprinted through the narrow passages, the howling snowstorm now a cacophony of screams and cries echoing through the cave. The footprints behind us grew larger, more numerous, as if an entire army of snowmen were pursuing us, their relentless pursuit leaving us with no choice but to keep moving. Finally, we burst out of the cave, the storm now a blinding tempest that made visibility nearly impossible. The howling wind threatened to knock us off our feet, and the snow whipped around us like icy daggers. We stumbled through the whiteout, the footprints leading us deeper into the wilderness, until we reached a small clearing where our tents had been set up. But the nightmare was far from over. As dawn broke, the storm began to abate, the first light of morning revealing the devastation around us. Our tents were torn apart, the gear scattered across the snow-covered ground. My heart sank as I realized the gravity of our situation. One of our friends, Jake, was missing. Panic set in as we searched the clearing, the footprints now even larger and more numerous than before, leading away from the scene. "Jake!" I called out, my voice breaking with fear. "Where are you?" No response came, just the oppressive silence of the aftermath. Emily clung to me, tears streaming down her face, while Sarah paced nervously, her mind racing with worst-case scenarios. "We need to find him," Laura said firmly, determination replacing the fear in her eyes. "We can't leave without him." We followed the footprints, our hearts heavy with dread, as they led us deeper into the wilderness. The snow was now piled higher, making each step more difficult, but the thought of Jake's safety pushed us forward. Hours passed as we trekked through the unforgiving winter landscape, the footprints eventually leading us to a hidden crevasse nestled between two towering pines. The crevasse was narrow and treacherous, but we had no choice but to continue, our fear propelling us onward. As we navigated the icy passage, the howling wind now felt like a mournful wail, echoing the sorrow of our lost friend. "Jake, if you're here, please come out," I called out, my voice cracking with desperation. But there was no answer, only the oppressive darkness and the lingering presence of the snowbound curse that had claimed our friend. The footprints seemed to mock us, leading us to a final, chilling realization: Jake had fallen victim to the very nightmare we had tried to escape, trapped by the relentless pursuit of the snowmen that roamed the White Mountains. We reached the end of the crevasse, the snow now a swirling vortex around us, and the footprints disappearing into the void. The reality of our loss hit us like a freight train, the weight of our friend's disappearance settling heavily on our souls. "We have to go back," Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible over the wind's mournful cry. "We need to leave this place and never come back." We turned, the howling storm now a tempest of rage and sorrow, and made our way back to the clearing. The footprints behind us seemed to fade, the snowmen's presence retreating into the shadows as we escaped the cursed mountain. As we huddled together, exhausted and broken, the first rays of dawn began to pierce through the storm clouds, the snowstorm finally subsiding. The White Mountains stood silent once more, the echoes of our nightmare lingering in the cold morning air. In the weeks that followed, the memory of that January night haunted us. We sought solace in each other's company, grappling with the loss of Jake and the terrifying encounter that had forever changed us. The footprints remained etched in our minds, a constant reminder of the malevolent forces that lurk beneath the snow-covered peaks. But the true horror lay not in the supernatural entities that had pursued us, but in the fragility of our own humanity when faced with the unknown. The White Mountains had tested us in ways we could never have imagined, pushing us to the brink of despair and forcing us to confront the darkest corners of our souls. Years have passed since that harrowing winter climb, but the scars remain, both visible and invisible. Emily grew up with stories of her brave parents who faced unimaginable terror, her innocence tainted by the lingering shadows of our ordeal. Sarah moved away, unable to shake the nightmares that still plagued her nights, while Laura and I stayed in Salem, the town's rich history now intertwined with our own tragic tale. Sometimes, when the snow begins to fall and the wind howls through the pines, I find myself staring into the vast expanse of the White Mountains, the memory of Jake's laughter and the haunting howls echoing in my mind. The footprints, though long erased from the snow, remain indelibly marked on my heart, a symbol of the price we paid for our desire to conquer the wild. The snowbound shadows of the White Mountains became more than just a story, it was a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the enduring power of friendship in the face of unspeakable horror. It taught me that some places hold onto their secrets tightly, their darkness ever present beneath the pristine surface, waiting for the next unsuspecting soul to uncover their chilling truths. And so, as I sit by the fireplace on quiet winter nights, the snow falling softly outside, I am reminded of that fateful climb and the friends we lost to the shadows of the White Mountains. Their memory lives on, a silent guardian ensuring that the horrors we faced are never forgotten, and that the legacy of our encounter serves as a cautionary tale to those who dare to challenge the unforgiving wilderness.